Assalamu alaikum, Run Things Rude Boy, Nabil Aziz, becomingthealphamuslim.com, and the Becoming the Alpha Muslim podcast. So, I have about 20% of my audience actually are females. I know, right? So, basically, these women are some of my most engaged readers, and they do send me a lot of email, or they comment, or they send me messages on Facebook, supporting the work and telling me that the work is very much needed. A lot of them they kind of feel like something's not right with the online discourse surrounding Muslim men and Muslim women today. So this episode is for them. My guest today is Nour Goda, who is the founder and editor-in-chief of the Between Arabs project, which is a blog and a podcast, which is betweenarabs.com. And she's here to talk to me today about a bunch of general random stuff, because we couldn't think of a specific topic or a specific theme to talk about. Noor, how are you?
I'm well, alhamdulillah. How are you, Nabil?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. It's been a while. I think you had me on your podcast last October.
Yep, that's right. It has definitely been a while.
And it's probably the best episode you've recorded so far.
It's definitely the most controversial so far. So, depending on your definition of best, then I guess yes, you take the trophy on that one.
Yeah, that's my shtick anyway. So, um, I think what we wanted to start off talking about was the differences between Eastern and Western Muslims. One of the questions I get from my readers is, dude, you're living all the way in Dubai. Why are you talking about Muslims in America or Canada or wherever?
Mm-hmm.
And I do have my own answer for that. It's part of the strategy of my website, because of the cultural dynamics and the popular cultural dynamics. It goes from west to east and not from east to west. And we just wanted to go over a few of the differences. So I think over here we take it for granted that I live in a Muslim country. There are 3 masajid walking distance from me. I hear the adhan every 5 times a day. Fridays are off. I can go to Jumu'ah, no problem. I don't have to worry about getting back to work. Ramadan, we have Ramadan timing, so we work less hours during the month. So I think we do take it granted the fact that we do live in a Muslim country and we're able to practice our faith freely without hindrance for the most part. So what is it like
Right.
for you, as you live in New York? I think you've lived most of your life there. What is it like as a Muslim who is trying to practice your faith while navigating the socio-cultural context of 2017?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and it's a really good one. And I would agree with you, Nabil, about the sort of wave of west to east and how that bleeds into the issues that Muslims abroad, or for me abroad, are having to tackle. But as far as being a Muslim and also an Arab in the United States, especially right now in Trump's era, which I'm sure we'll get to, it's obvious that we are in the limelight. All the news is on us. Pop culture is exploiting our identities. And at the same time, growing up in a post 9/11 era, we're trying to make sense of who we are as Muslim millennials. So I would say that there are 2 things for me personally that are constantly on my mind, or 2 frameworks that I try to keep front and center when I'm reflecting on my experiences as an American citizen and as a Muslim. The first is, this idea of double consciousness, which is a term or a phrase that was coined by W.E.B. Du Bois to describe the experience of Black Americans. And in so many ways, this concept, I think, resonates with what it means to be a Muslim American or a Muslim Westerner, wherever you are in a Western developed nation, whereby you're constantly trying to negotiate your identity. On the one hand, you're American or you're Canadian or you're British, but you are also Muslim. And there is a tension there because though you may have or bear the citizenship of these nation states and you identify with their cultures very much, having grown up in them, you're also, by your faith and your lifestyle and your outlook on morality and the world, you are also pitted as other, and you're looked down on, and you're seen under very suspicious lighting by the very people that you simultaneously identify with in different ways. So this constant negotiation and tension is extremely exhausting. And I've talked about that quite a bit on Between Arabs. And it's something that I think we need to talk more about, and we need to develop a lexicon and a language about it, especially for millennials, the youth who are growing up in a very charged political climate. And then I think the other important thing that distinguishes Muslims in the West versus Muslims in the East comes down to this sense of belongingness and the love needs that we have as human beings. So if we wanted to think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom of this pyramid, right? So let me take a step back. There are essentially 5 categories of human needs that this theorist says every single human being, irrespective of time and place, is always going to need. And at the very bottom, we're talking about your physiological needs, you know, your food, your water, your shelter, and then safety and security. And then comes belongingness, relationships, friends, community, followed by your esteem needs, your sense of prestige and accomplishment, your self-efficacy. And then once all of those 4 needs are met, you reach this pinnacle of self-actualization, where you're able to achieve your full potential, so to speak. And for Muslim Americans, we're stuck right in the center of this pyramid, where if we're lucky enough, being Muslims in the West, our physiological needs are met. We have shelter, alhamdulillah. We've got food. We're relatively safe and secure. Yes, there is a lot of question about that now, but for the most part, it's not like we're in Syria or Yemen or Iraq where bombs are being dropped on us and we don't know if we're going to see the light of tomorrow. So for the most part, we're safe. But this is where we get stuck. It's in the 3rd level of this pyramid, and that is the layer of belongingness, whereby our intimate relationships, our friendships, and our sense of connection to one another is under threat. And a lot of that comes back to modernity and liberalism and the struggles and challenges that are consequences of the refugee statuses and experiences of many Muslims who have had to flee their countries to go to places like the United States and Canada and the UK and Australia and so on. So I don't know. I don't want to speak for those of you who are out in the UAE and in the Levant, but for the most part, when you're living as the other or the minority or the subjugated group in a predominantly Western society that looks at your culture and your religion as archaic and backwards, you will always have questions about belongingness. You will always struggle with this sense that you don't belong. So those are the 2 things that I think are always at the front and center of my mind when I'm thinking about my identity as a Muslim American. The idea of double consciousness and the idea of self-actualization and how far away I am from that as somebody who is a minority in the country that I'm a citizen in.
Okay, so now there are two things there that I wanted to sort of explore a little further. You mentioned W-E, is it Dubois or Dubois?
We say Du Bois here, but yes, it's French, so Dubois.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'm...
Although if you say Dubois here, people look at you like you're stuck up, so...
Okay. All right, so, and you mentioned the dual identity thing. So, I've got 2 questions for you. The first part is why does something related to race color your idea of being a Muslim? And the second part is Aren't there other faith groups in America as well? How do they manage? Christians, I suppose there are some that are quite faithful to their religion. There are Jews. There are Mormons. So why
Hmm.
is your identity as a Muslim special compared to them? Why? Do you get what I'm saying?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a really good question. So, two things. Yes, the theory itself, the theory of double consciousness itself, has everything to do with race in terms of its origin and the way that Du Bois set it out. But if we wanted to adopt his concept and try to explain the split identity that we have as Muslims in the United States, we could adopt his theory. My reason for latching onto this is because when we look at the law and this very utopian idea of freedom of religion and the ability to practice any faith that you have in the United States, it's a myth. By and large, it is not true, because when you start to analyze court cases and you actually look at the nitty-gritty everyday situations that may or may not have to do with Muslims, it may or may not have to do with Mormons, it could be any religion really, where your way of practicing begins to infringe on the what's the word I'm looking for? The images and the notions of what modernity is. Anything that challenges that is automatically suppressed. And sometimes it's Islam and the way that, Muslims practice, like the hijab, for example, and modesty, or the adhan. And then for Sikhs, it's, the turban. And so it really just has to do with the way that your religion manifests itself in the way that the United States or any Western developed nation really prizes and views what modernity is and what progress is and what freedom and liberty for all is. Now, we could absolutely pause and argue that within secular theory, there is a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of antithetical concepts that completely contradict themselves. And I don't think that the concept of double consciousness necessarily has to explain race. It can explain any kind of split identity that you have, because as a Muslim, you're trying to practice your religion all the while knowing that there's this exterior lens that is always surveying you and surveillancing you. And so you can't ignore that. There's no way you can ignore that. Whereas in Dubai, you are a part of the majority. It is not abnormal to hear the adhan and to wear hijab and to dress modestly. The abnormality there is to be immodest.
Right, I got you. So it's just I guess it's a reflection of the changing times and the changing culture, in that Muslims, or an outwardly visible Muslim, is sort of alien to what people think is normal.
Right. Normal in the secular sense too,
Right,
though,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Whether or not Americans have the language and the theories in mind to explain it, and the learned, educated ones do, but your everyday average Joe in America can't necessarily or won't necessarily tell you, I believe in modernity and I believe in secular theory, but the way that they operate and the way that the media feeds that information in very simplistic terms is what you see every single day in the United States.
Right. I get you. So, moving on from that, I'm counting from the 10th of November 2016. It's basically 6 months now. You've been living in Trump's America. What's changed?
Personally, on a everyday level, not much has changed for me. I am privileged in the sense that I don't have to worry about being deported, at least not right now. And I don't have family that's, trying to travel from abroad to the United States. But for other people, yes, this is affecting them on a day-to-day level. I think we have to be very careful about the images and the narrative that is always being propelled at us in the media. Yes, Trump is a disaster. Yes, he is dangerous. Yes, he represents a lot of Americans. But at the same time, I personally don't see him and his politics as being that much different from the politics of figures who have held office before. And of course, this will raise lots of debate in the United States, and people will completely disagree with me. But when you come from a subjugated group, when you come from a group that has been, or whose countries have been bombed to infinity for countless years, there's really no difference in what Trump recently did by bombing Syria and what Obama has been doing and what Bush did before him and what Clinton did before him. So to me, he represents just another link in the chain of endless imperialism and capitalist domination. And the Muslim world has always been at the center of the West's conquest to dominate the world. That is not something that is new whatsoever. But I will say that if nothing else, personally, on the ground, I have found more non-Muslims and non-Arabs to be a lot more apologetic and empathetic since Trump took office. They seem to be a lot more tolerant now than they were before. I mean, I definitely have a lot more people asking me questions about my faith background, about my background as an Arab American. Before Trump, people either didn't know that I was an Arab or a Muslim, or they knew and they didn't care to ask, or maybe it was taboo in their mind to ask. I don't know. But at least now people are starting to talk and they're curious and they want to know more. And I was very overwhelmed in a positive way when I put out a post on Facebook recently about donating to Syria. And mashallah, the majority of the people who reached out to say they want to donate are non-Muslims and non-Arabs. So if nothing else, Trump is actually helping others in the United States to bond with a lot of Muslims and to talk to their neighbors and to learn more about their identities.
Right. And we're gonna get to we're gonna talk about Syria in a little bit. But you mentioned narratives. One narrative that I've seen from the Muslims in particular is this narrative of victimhood. How much has sort of Trump's rise over the past year and a half contributed to victimization of Muslims via Islamophobia or hate crimes? Because I think if you remember correctly, after he got elected, there were a bunch of hate crime hoaxes perpetrated by Muslim women, and I think there was one by a Muslim guy as well, but most of them there were a few from sisters. That, don't you think that narrative as well is something that is a problem in general?
Yes, I do. I do think that this sort of urge to begin capitalizing on victimhood is very dangerous, and it's a slippery slope. One of the narratives that I see very prevalent in the Muslim American community is the capitalizing of the visibly Muslim woman vis-a-vis the hijab. And it's something that, ironically, is pitted as very Islamic feminist sort of imagery. And it's a way that a lot of, I think, Muslim women are latching onto these buzz phrases and buzzwords to demonstrate solidarity and empowerment. But I actually think it's a distraction in many ways. I think it's distracting us from the more insidious issues that exist through or because of the fact that Trump is our president right now. And if we're not victimizing ourselves, then we're extremely loud and proud about being hijabis. So these are the two parallel
breaking stereotypes and pushing boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for breaking stereotypes. Go for it. It's
man,
just
screw that. That's like such a cliche BS line, dude. Okay. Khalas, there's no stereotypes to break, akhi. Like, you can do whatever you want in that country. What stereotypes are there to break? Come on, like it's like a hijabi woman, like she does, like she goes out to like buy a like the Pepsi ad. The Pepsi
Yeah,
ad is
yeah,
a
yeah.
perfect example. Like what's like breaking stereotypes about that? She's a photographer. The
Well,
only
it's
problem
not,
in
right? It's not breaking stereotypes. It's feeding into Western images of what it means to be normal and what it means to be human, if nothing else, right? So we keep pandering to these narratives. And when we're doing that, we're moving further and further away of having control over the framework that we're supposed to be using to explain to ourselves, not to anybody else, but to ourselves who we actually are. There's no denying that there is serious identity crises happening in the Muslim Western world. Absolutely. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that linguistically, we are so far away from the Arabic language or from other mother tongues, Urdu and, Pashto, whatever the case may be. When you lose your language, you lose a lot of your identity. And not having those roots and being so inculcated in the American society and American culture means that we are completely blind to the fact that we've adopted this lens or this framework, which is secular theory or secularism. And so when well-intentioned activists like hijabi Muslims are out there doing the work that they're doing, they don't see that what they're doing is actually counterproductive. They have no bearing on the other side of the framework that is trying to dismantle secularism. And if they do, then they have adopted the Western idea that, well, the Islamic framework is completely backwards and it needs a makeover, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem, with them sort of trying to show Muslim women as a part of the American identity. What I have a problem with is they take this sort of caricature of a Muslim woman. She's like sort of sanitized, a little bit diluted. She's got the funky hijab on and she's like very stylishly dressed. Or like if you remember Alicia Keys, she posted a picture of a niqabi, with there's a wind effect so you can see all of the curves of the body and the whole leg, one of the legs was completely showing.
Yep.
So like they'll
Yep.
show the Muslim woman in like a very like exotic, fetishized way, as if
Oriental.
yeah, exactly, as if it's something like the Muslim woman is something to be conquered, or you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yeah. It is completely in line with neo Orientalism, and we're still suffering from it. It has yet to be addressed, and the layer of that I'm trying to say is problematic is that we're contributing to this perpetuation of neo Orientalist imagery and ways of understanding and viewing Muslims altogether. And yeah, unfortunately, the Muslim woman is front and center when it comes to all of this because she's the most visibly Muslim part of the community.
Right, exactly. And they don't really care about sort of the Muslim woman who's very plainly dressed. She has to be like one of those yes, Queen Slay type Muslim women, right?
You realize for a moment there you sounded just like one of us, right?
No, I got this. I got this line from Twitter because it keeps on popping up. Like, my man Uncle Hotep, he mentions it. So it's like a common phrase among millennial or Generation Z women.
I mean, we're American. We like our buzzwords. This is all a part of PR and marketing and how we get to capitalize on our product, which is ourselves. So this is unfortunately what we do.
Fascinating. And so Trump's launched, this is a bit of a quick switch over. Trump has recently launched 60 missiles into some airstrip in Syria. And social media is on fire. Muslim Twitter is lit. Muslim Facebook is also lit. I'm very surprised at how quickly so many people turn into political science commentators. And
Yeah.
okay, I don't know that much about what's going on in Syria, so I don't want to put my 2 cents in. I'd rather just, okay, if somebody says something that seems credible, I'll share that. But
Yeah.
it's like everybody has an opinion, like, and these people have,
Right.
they have a phrase, armchair quarterback.
Break that
So,
down.
so it's like yesterday I saw this guy posting on Facebook. He was like trying to break down the analysis of how this is actually bad for the Syrian revolution. And this guy's like Pakistani living in Pakistan somewhere. It's bad for the Syrian revolution because it'll co-opt the agenda of the revolution, trying to make Russia and America the main players and take away the spotlight from the rebels. And he's got this very complex analysis when he is not, first of all, he's not an Arab, he's not Syrian. He has no clue, first of all, who even launched those chemical attacks in the first place. I mean, there's a lot of speculation going on, and people have intelligence and this and that, but nobody's 100% sure who did the attack actually. Okay, and
Right.
we don't have all of the facts. And people are speaking with such certainty, and there's so many arguments going around. You
Mm-hmm.
are you're Palestinian born, is that right? And then you were raised in Syria?
No, I am Syrian born. My father's Palestinian, my mother's Syrian, and I grew up here in New York.
Right. Okay. So you have a lot of family in Syria and Palestine in
Right.
general,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got more facts than the average Facebook political scientist.
I mean, so two things with this. I try to empathize with the people who come out, on social media and other platforms to try to make sense of the atrocities that are happening around the world. Because I think when we're doing this, even if it is a Pakistani out in Pakistan who's trying to talk about Syria and deconstructive, the intention
Khalas,
there
man,
is
he's got his own problems. Mind your own problems. Pakistan is like a hellhole of its own, right? Solve the problems in Pakistan. Go ahead. Pardon me.
But I think it's this. I would like to think that it's humanity's desire to try to figure out what's going on so that we could spearhead in a direction that is, going to help out the rest of humanity. So when people come on to Facebook and they try to tell us what's happening in Syria, even if the facts are not straight, and that is dangerous. I will not, try to sugarcoat that. It is very dangerous when people come out sounding like they are experts on any political issue and it's shared very widely and publicly, and then other people latch onto it and repost it or retweet it. It is very dangerous. But for a lot of people, like the average Joes around the world, it's this desire to try and, I think, connect with their fellow brothers and sisters in other countries and to try to understand what's going on because it has, wider issues for the entire Muslim ummah. That being said, yes, I do have family in Syria and we hear from them about what's happening out there. That doesn't mean that what they're going through is now the voice for all of Syria. I mean, even when I'm speaking to my uncle or my cousins about what's happening, I have questions, I have doubts, I have, suspicions of my own. But again, the point of the matter is that I don't care about the politics there. Are they safe? Are they able to get what they need at this moment in time to just, get them through another day? Because the reality is that these political facts are going to continue to be very nebulous to us because that's part of the strategy. This is part of why, the powers that be are able to get away with doing what they're doing because we're all arguing, trying to figure out who's the bad guy and who's the good guy, rather than focusing on the fact that there are lives being lost every single day. And let's just get in there and let's help in whatever way that we can. So Syria is today's, major issue, but Iraq was in the same position not too long ago. And I, like all Arabs all over the world, like so many Muslims all over the world, it's gut-wrenching to see what's happening to our homelands. And I never imagined I would be alive when Syria went down like this, because the last time I was there was literally the summer before 9/11. I was 15 years old, and that was the last time I ever stepped foot on Syrian soil.
Wow.
And I never imagined that I would not be able to go back. Yeah, it's gut-wrenching.
What do you think? I get that it comes from a good place, because Muslims in general are very concerned with how Muslims are doing all over the world.
Right.
It's part of it's
Right.
part of our faith, and it's part of our brotherhood that transcends, national borders and transcends blood relationships. What is a more
Right.
productive way for people to channel that anger, channel that frustration, to doing things that are productive? And I have my own ideas, but I want to hear yours actually.
Well, one of the strategies or techniques that I really, really appreciate and that I try to learn more about every single day is the strategy of having intellectual empathy. And intellectual empathy is basically trying to understand through reason and through rational and logical thinking what somebody who completely disagrees with you, how they arrived at their ideas and their conclusions, and to stick with the conversation rather than to start, taking jabs at each other and arguing unproductively with one another. And what I love about intellectual empathy is it has everything to do with respecting the fact that the best solutions come when we are paying attention to and we're taking into account not just our logic, but our emotions as well. In the secular postmodern world, we place so much emphasis on data and on cognitive thinking, and we completely bypass the importance and the inherence of emotions and how emotions help us to get to where we need to get to in the decisions that we make. When it comes to these kinds of issues, like what's going on in Syria, how can we remove emotion? There's no way. There's no way, whether you're Syrian or not. You can't remove your sentiments and your feelings of empathy and sorrow for what is happening in the world, unless you're a sociopath, and that is, a biological dilemma for you. But for the rest of us who are human, there's no way that you can. So rather than to try and fight that, learn to respect your emotions and develop intellectual empathy, where you can actually get through these very challenging conversations to understand the perspective of other people. That, to me, is a far more productive way to have a conversation and how to generate solutions than to come out as a pseudo political scientist or sociologist and to try to, share what you know and basically talk at people or talk down to others. Listen, be curious, ask more questions than giving statements.
Right, I got you. In fact, that the emotional sort of intellectual empathy thing, I sort of stole that from you and used it for one of my blog posts because it was actually quite useful. And I think I'll add my own sort of 2 cents. I think people are so focused on what's going on elsewhere and all of the problems that are happening around the world that they forget to work on themselves. And I think that's
100%.
That's the most powerful tool that we have, because Allah says in the Quran, Allah does not change the condition of people until they change that which is within themselves. And that ayah actually to me is so hopeful and so I hate this word now, empowering, that because it gives you an option. Like when you're seeing all of these children getting killed and you don't know what to do and you're about to lose your shit. And you mentioned your friend, your Christian friend who came to you crying, who called you crying, asking what she could do. The Muslim, his mental model or his frame of reference, his paradigm is I have the power to change things just by working on myself, working on my family, working on my community around me. Can you imagine what would happen if everybody just did that? Work on themselves,
Absolutely.
work on their families, and work on their spheres of influence, their communities around them. We would have no more problems.
Yep. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's great that you mentioned that because actually the great cognitive psychologist Gordon Gallup, he explains how empathy is actually a byproduct of self-awareness. So knowing yourself and really working on yourself, that is how you will get to a place where you can actually empathize with other people and help the rest of society. You can't do anything for anybody else if you yourself are not so in tune with who you are and what you need to be doing as a member of this world. So everything you're saying, I completely agree with. And if we wanted to think about it in terms of psychology, there's no challenge there. They're saying the same thing.
Yeah. And I think Bruce Lee says all knowledge is self-knowledge, because ultimately it's whatever knowledge you come across, whatever thing happens to you, the only thing that you can really control is how you react to something.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's where you basically have to train yourself to be self-aware and react in the correct way every single time. And it's something very, very difficult. It takes, I guess, a lifetime to master.
For sure.
And you recently, we're going to move on from Syria now. You recently put out a podcast about, was it, Are Arabs Racist? What was that the title of the podcast? Are Arabs Racist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that was based on a news piece that went viral. This African maid in Kuwait tried to, I guess, jump out of the window to save herself from apparently one of her employers was trying to kill her. That's what the story was on social media when
it's ridiculous.
When the sister was interviewed. So you made this podcast talking about racism in the Arab consciousness, and you basically said it's not just back home and it's not just our grandfathers and grandmothers. We have some of it too. And everything you mentioned is fine. There was one aspect you mentioned talking about critical race theory. What the frack is critical race theory? This is some next level stuff. Like people, why do you guys complicate things so much? Critical race theory, what?
Yeah, this is why.
This is your gender studies professor brainwashing you people.
No. This is why I love Islam, because all of these fields of study, yes, they've done the work of deconstructing sociological phenomenons, but when you come back to, okay, so what's the solution? What's the answer? When you open the Quran and you read the Hadith, it's there, So if you don't want the long version, just pay attention to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to do, and you'll be all right. But critical race theory, it's a framework. It's a social science framework that helps us to understand how race and power and law, especially in Western nations, work together to uplift and maintain white supremacy while exploiting and subjugating and oppressing people of color. And I believe Patricia Williams and Kimberly Crenshaw were the pioneers of this theory, and it's used it's a very popular framework. And whether we realize we are talking through a critical race theory lens or not, we are all doing it in America. The millennials are doing it all the time. The Black Lives Matter movement is rooted in, critical race theory itself. So, and this is also a theory, by the way, that has innovated a lot of other fields like gender and women's studies and American studies and political science. But it's about trying to deconstruct how white America maintains its power and how it's able to keep the rest of the country, I'm simplifying things, and how it's able to keep other peoples under control, essentially.
And you mentioned white supremacy. This is something that I'm still trying to understand. In fact, I have a kind of a problem with it. There are so many white people in America that have it just as bad as black people. What supremacy do they have?
Yeah.
And the whole idea of white supremacy, because I haven't experienced it. Okay, so from my perspective,
Yeah.
I see it as something that's a logical fallacy that's known as the apex fallacy. Like people say, the Jews run the entire world. You know that meme, right? So it's just a few Jews who are in positions of power. So people sort of generalize it to all Jews run, the entire world. That's not really the case. There are a lot of poor Jews as well. And it's the same thing with white supremacists. There are a few people who happen to be white in the upper echelons of power, but not all white people have those privileges. So can you explain that to me a little bit?
Okay, so we have to talk about socioeconomics a little bit because socioeconomics works part and parcel with our understanding of power in the United States. Yes, there are poor white people all over the country. Yes, that absolutely exists. And they have the same, or they experience the same sort of issues that other poor people, irrespective of race and ethnicity, also have to deal with. Excuse me. So that's a socioeconomic issue. And that's, a consequence of capitalism and the disappearing middle class and the swelling lower class. But I don't think that it's accurate to say that it's an apex fallacy, that white identity is the status quo and has always been the status quo in the United States, because it absolutely is. So for instance, on a day-to-day experience, if you're a person of color, let's say you're a black male, you walk into a retail store, the people who own the store, unless they're also black, will look upon you with suspicion, because this is a built-in psychology of American culture. We see it in our media. We see it in the literature that we read. We see it in the way people treat one another. It's a part of our schema. It's a learned kind of sociological phenomenon. And so societal racism that privileges white people over others is absolutely a part of the American culture. And it exists to a degree as well in Canada. From what I understand, it's not as bad. I can't really speak to the UK. I've actually never been there. But when it comes to your livelihood and your opportunities in life, or what we like to call the achievement gap in the United States, there's absolutely no question that systemically, if you are poor and or of color, you will not receive the same kinds of privileges and opportunities that your white counterparts will be able to receive. And it's you studied in Chicago, right?
Yes.
How long were you there?
I was there for, I believe, 6 years.
Okay. So, I mean, Chicago's also a great example. If you were to go into the some of the poorer areas in Chicago, you could see a microcosm of these sociological and societal things happening in those communities.
Right. I have seen some of those factors. I used to work in a gas station as a cashier. It's like the most typical brown person job you can think of. And I have sort of felt myself, that schema that you mentioned, I have sort of felt myself think of people of color who would come into the store that way. But I don't think it was something that has systemically been inside me, but it came about as a reaction to experiences I've had within the store while I was minding the store. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know how to word this without sounding ridiculously racist, but and even I've seen white people, a few white people that were that are sort of from the lower socioeconomic class, um,
Mm-hmm.
behave this way, where they would be very unruly within the store and they would try to use the commotion or distractions to try to shoplift things. And I would, just
Mm-hmm.
from my own personal experience, I would have to keep an eye on certain kinds of individuals. And how
Okay.
is that? Could you explain how that is, quote unquote, systemic racism when I don't have that paradigm of systemic racism in me because I'm an immigrant.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. I think you explained it right there. You don't have the same schema as an American, right? Somebody who goes through the education system in America, learns American history, learns about slavery and the civil rights movement. And you don't have the years of interaction with different races, ethnicities of different socioeconomic backgrounds. So the anecdote that you just described there, that in and of itself is one experience that we don't want to cast as like, well, this is how it must be across the board. Because again, that goes back to socioeconomics. When you put any human being, regardless of race and ethnicity, in a situation where they are economically suffering or disempowered or whatever word you want to use, underprivileged, you're going to get similar behaviors no matter what, right? Like this unruly sort of I don't even have the right word. I don't want to use a very charged word, but we become very primal. No, we become very primal. It's survival, right? It becomes a survival mentality, right? You become sort of thuggish in what you have to do in order to survive. And that has nothing to do with race or ethnicity. And that has everything to do with socioeconomics, money. And when we're talking about race as it pertains to the United States, we always have to historicize and contextualize it in the grand scheme of American history. From the very beginning, the United States was founded on the backs of slaves. And that is a history that we can't ignore here in the United States, because everything that we are able to enjoy, everything that we've built, everything that exists, the top universities, they were built by slave hands. And that's something that we can't ignore. We can't, turn the other cheek, especially when this kind of power play still exists and the system is still subtly or not so subtly perpetuating these kinds of injustices. I was a teacher in very low socioeconomic communities for about 7 years in the Bronx and Harlem and in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. And I don't want to get into it because it's a larger discussion and it requires probably its own podcast. But the education system in the United States is so severely segregated that in and of itself is enough to show you that racism is systemic in this country. That certain people who live in certain areas will not get the resources and the kind of masterful, artful educators to teach them. Because we all know education is power, not to sound cliche. But once you have, the knowledge to be able to empower yourself and you don't fall victim to these other powerful systems, then you're not going to live life the way that your ancestors did. And so the education system, the way that it's set up right now, helps to prevent the uprising of these subjugated groups of people. Am I making sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Although I still have a few questions regarding whether this is an indicator of, systemic racism, or it's just whether it's something that's, a correlation and not a causation. But we'll move on because I want to talk about education a little bit. Now, I've heard from the black people I interact with who are who have experience with the school system, where a black child who tries to study hard or take school seriously is accused of acting white, and they'll get made fun of. How does that? Can you put that into context for me a little bit?
I mean, it's social stereotyping, right? Like that sounds like just your everyday kind of social stereotyping. There are stereotypes about every single race and every single ethnicity. You should pick up a book. It's called Ego Tripp's Big Book of Racism. It's comical. It's very comical. And it just goes in on every single nationality, race, ethnicity. And the idea is, I'm not racist. I hate all people. That's kind of the attitude, that's totally up your alley.
Of course.
But so that right there is a kind of internalized stereotyping that, let's say, I don't want to speak on behalf of, African Americans, but it sounds to me like this is an example of internalizing the images and the archetypes that exist within this system of power, that Black people are not smart, Black people are not articulate, Black people don't study, Black people make music, right? Asians are smart. They're really good at math. They're the best at math. Jews are really good with money. Arabs are good at bombing shit and subjugating their women.
And making
right?
kanafa.
So, yeah, sometimes. So these kinds of stereotypes, be they good or bad, they exist about every single society. And the thing to keep in mind is, even if you're talking about a positive stereotype, right? A stereotype is still a stereotype, and it's not justified whether it's negative or positive, because what they are is kind of what you were saying about the apex fallacy. You take one idea and you cast it as a generalization on an entire group of people. And then what happens after that is those people will sometimes internalize those notions and start to believe that they're actually true.
Right. Okay, I get what you're saying, and then we're going to move on to the next topic because some related stuff is going to come in. You recently posted a graphic from, I guess, was it a Gallup poll or a Pew poll, showing that Muslim millennials are more likely than other faith groups to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Why should Muslims support the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I think if you are a Muslim in America, that part of you that is American has to respect American history and to understand the suffering and the plight of people of color, particularly African Americans here in the United States. And so whether you're Muslim or not, you should be standing up for justice no matter what. And you should be standing up for justice as it pertains to African Americans in the United States, because they're the ones who have suffered the most, in my opinion. I know that there's some question about victimhood that you had mentioned, and it got me thinking a little bit more about how that might relate outside of the United States. But I think in the paradigm that we are operating with here, there's kind of this dichotomy whereby you're either for the justice of African Americans or you're not. And right now, the Black Lives Matter movement happens to be the approach or the pathway that the nation has taken on to try to get back to that agenda of civil rights once again that we've steered so far away from since the civil rights movement in the 1960s.
Right, okay. So there's Black Lives Matter, the sort of cultural phenomenon, and there's Black Lives Matter, the organization.
Mm-hmm.
What gets confusing to me is there doesn't seem like any attempt by Muslims who support Black Lives Matter to um, to sort of couch their support in in an Islamic paradigm. And recently, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf came under fire for some statements that he said um,
Right.
about the topic, and there were a number of articles written, dissing him and in support of him as well.
Yeah.
And more, I'm seeing Muslim scholars and thankfully black Muslim scholars saying that, okay, listen, we need to, if we're going to support this, we have to do it in our way, as opposed to just accepting what they give us.
Right. Right.
So there's a branding problem here from my perspective as speaking as a marketer. Black Lives Matter is a sentence that carries a certain meaning, okay? And now you've taken that meaning and applied it to an organization which doesn't necessarily have that same meaning, because the goals of the Black Lives Matter organization, first of all, it's run by it's funded by radical leftists. It's run by leftists, two feminists, homosexual, and a white guy pretending to be black. And on their website, they have, instead of history, they say her story. And in the goals section, they have, promotion of LGBTQ, queer affirming, destroying the nuclear family, and all of these things seem like a pretty big problem and a red line that we don't want to cross as Muslims, because ultimately at the end of the day, we want everybody to become Muslim. And the further away they are from their fitrah as human beings, the harder it is to sort of convey the message to Islam to them, because they have all this baggage that we have to deal with, right? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
So in that context, how can you just give a blanket support to the Black Lives Matter movement as religiously observant Muslims? There are Muslims that are not religiously observant that don't really care either way. But as someone who is practicing, why do you sort of give that blanket sort of support? And I'm not saying that you fully support it. Could you just explain it to me?
Sure. So let's go back to, remember at the beginning when we were talking about millennials and how we're very quick to jump on trends, and the way that our framework is very Western secular and really nothing more other than that. This is where I think we see it in practice with the Muslim community advocating and joining the Black Lives Matters movement. So I think that everything that you just pointed to, the conflict of interest, the fact that this movement is not just about the liberation and justice for African Americans, but also it's about support for the LGBTQ movement. It's about support for feminist ideologies and ways of imagining the world. That does certainly pose a conflict for Muslims. And I hesitate to use the word Muslims as like a blanket statement, especially because when you're in the United States, everything becomes very complicated in terms of truth with the capital T and truth with the lowercase t, right? And so truth with the capital T is like your absolute facts, things we can't deny. The sky is blue, the sun, is warm, hot, whatever. And then your lowercase t's is like, well, that's your truth, Islam. My truth is atheism, etc. And I think for many Muslims, especially younger, less informed Muslims who want to be a part of something good, something humane, and they want to be activists, there's this leap to join something that you're not fully aware of its like widespread implications. And at the same time, you've grown up in a society that has taught you to respect truths with a lowercase t, which automatically means that you're going to end up supporting things that contradict your truth at the same time, right? And so I don't disagree that there are conflicts of interest between what the greater organization is advocating for and what Islam, advocates for. There is a conflict of interest there. And I think depending on who you're talking to, you're going to have self-identifying Muslims who will say, I support the LGBTQ movement. I support feminism. I am a feminist. And I also support the Black Lives Matters movement. And then you'll have feminists who say, I support the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't support the LGBTQ movement, and I don't identify as a feminist, right? So it gets extremely complicated depending on who you're talking to. I don't necessarily know that Muslims in America, by and large, fully understand the nuances of how this organization is layered, but all that is clear, because this is all that's presented on the surface level very superficially, is that Black people are facing severe discrimination. They're being killed by American policemen, and this has got to stop. There is no respect for Black life. And it's obviously wrong to disagree with that, because every human life matters. But then there's the more complicated question, which Hamza Yusuf came under fire for, right? And I think that even with you, Nabil, saying, I'm going to go back to what you said earlier. You said we as Muslims ultimately want everyone to be Muslim, right?
Yeah.
You saying that, right, and having Western Muslims, even Western Muslims hearing that will make them cringe. Why? Because they've grown up, or because I am a part of that society, we've grown up in a society whereby it is 100% taboo to preach your agenda or to preach your ideologies and to try to quote unquote convert other people. It's completely taboo, right? It's seen as obnoxious. It's seen as arrogant. It's seen as morally, disrespectful for the lowercase truths of other people. And therefore, even if that is your agenda, you never say that. Meanwhile, modernity and secularism is doing precisely that, but in very subtle and strategic ways. Because you can never be neutral. Nobody is neutral. No philosophy, no ideology is neutral. Everything is laden with political agendas. And it's not wrong for you to say that Muslims want other people to be Muslim, because to Muslims, this is the way of life, this is the word of God, and this is what is going to ensure that your soul is saved in the hereafter, right? Right. So to them, it's like the greatest thing that you could possibly want for a fellow human being. Exactly. But to the secular mind, it's you're imposing your beliefs on me, stay in your lane. And so even Muslim millennials, to a certain extent, even if it's just, partially, we've also ingested that kind of ideology. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I got you. There is one point though, which when you mentioned the killings of Black people by policemen. If I remember correctly, I've looked at some of these statistics, and the actual percentage of African American males or African Americans in general who are killed by cops is like less than 1%, and the vast majority of the murders are actually black on black crime. So this is another problem I have with the movement in that there is no concern given to the major problem that's within the community. It's just this, which if we're talking about Black lives mattering, it is black on black crime would be the more important issue, right?
Okay, so let's run with that logic for a second. Let's say these statistics are 100% accurate, yeah, and Black lives are being lost at the hands of other Black hands, right?
Yeah.
Why is that happening?
Gang violence, drug-related, just a general culture of violence and not valuing lives.
And where does that come from? Where does that culture of not valuing human life, gangs, drugs, where did that come from?
I don't know.
Yeah. I think in America, this is completely wound up with the systemic racism that we were talking about before, right? Where, once again, when you oppress people to such a degree that their basic human needs are not being met, it becomes survival of the fittest mentality. And then this casts itself one generation after another, after another, after another, right? And trauma can be inherited at the same time. So you're not just talking about learned behavior. You're not just talking about nature. You're talking nurture. You're talking about nature as well, biology, right? And so mental illness is also a huge problem in America. It's a huge problem all over the world, but in America, I always joke and say, but I mean it. I feel like every single one of us should have a therapist. It's extremely important. We need an objective third party to help us untangle our social issues. But I think if we are going to adopt that line of reason that the African American community is losing a lot of its members at the hands of its own members, then we have to be a little bit more inquisitive and try to figure out why. And the social dilemmas that they're struggling with are not new. They've existed for a very, very long time. And those are completely wound up with, I think, their basic human and civil rights needs not being met. And then when you try to figure out where that's coming from, the perpetrator is always the same. It always comes back to, white supremacy and white America and the status quo.
Right, okay. So now you have this system of white supremacy. So it's systemic racism. And the system, I would assume, is, if it does exist, let's just assume it does, is sort of well entrenched at all levels of society. So that means the system isn't going to go anywhere soon. So why would Black Lives Matter put all this energy into dismantling the systems of white supremacy when they can get an outsized payoff if they would focus on dealing with black on black crime instead?
I don't know what the answer to that is. But one thing I will say is I personally am very skeptical of quote unquote activist movements just in general. I'm very skeptical of, the whole let's get out into the streets and let's march and let's make noise and all of that. I think it has this collective effervescence that makes us feel like we're actually making a difference, but it's just an illusion. And I think after the 1960s in particular, the American government learned a lesson, and it's going to make sure that that kind of activism never challenges authority ever again to such a degree that the authority starts to lose its power. And that's why you've got 1,000,001 protests about Palestine and Black lives and anything, and it goes nowhere. It doesn't ever go anywhere. It's actually kind of funny because, the cops will know that, all right, there's a protest today at 6. Let's put the Israelis on this corner, Palestinians on that corner. The cops are literally yawning, watching us scream at each other from across the streets. And then it's like, all right, protest time is over, go home. Really? It's a staged sense of like, yeah, I'm making a difference. Yeah. And I get it because we're tired. We're all so tired. We want change. We're burning for change. But I agree with you, Nabil, that we've got to start with ourselves. Let's take a step back. Let's take a look at our, conditions on an individual level, at the family level, at the individual level, and let's start there. That can make a bigger difference. Whenever, my white friends are asking me, how can I support, the Arab cause? I'm like, just watch where you're putting your money. Where are you spending your dollars? How are you using your time? What media are you paying attention to? None of that requires you to go out into the street. You're just living life. Just live it a little differently and take control over how you're consuming the things that the world puts out to us.
Absolutely. This is why whenever this Black Lives Matter topic comes up among Muslims, I'll always mention Hotep, because I'm down with Hotep. Hotep is this movement that is completely antithetical to the Black Lives Matter movement, in that their whole paradigm is basically, okay, so what if white supremacy exists? We're just gonna rise above it and do what we can, put in the work and succeed. This is something that, personally, as a Muslim, that I would think that would make more sense for the Muslim community to get behind. Even though Hotep is a much smaller movement compared to Black Lives Matter, there is an element of quote unquote Islamicness to them, in that they focus on self-reliance, self-accountability, all things of that nature. And I believe we've discussed this before. I've shared some resources with you,
right?
And I've interviewed Hoteps on my website, on my podcast before.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to get your thoughts on that, if you've had a chance to sort of read them.
Well, first I have to share something inappropriately funny. So when I looked up Hotep, Urban Dictionary posted, and I can't say it, but it's Hotep followed by the N-word, right? So that phrase, a Hotep N-word, is a guy that uses his knowledge of conspiracy theories or his quote-unquote consciousness to get with women. And then the example, John says, I can balance those chakras for you. And Brittany says, you sound like a Hotep N-word. So this is the connotation behind this whole term and movement. But all jokes aside, I'm absolutely for the empowerment of human beings at an individual level and about taking charge of your own destiny. I am all about that. But I also think that there is power in numbers, and there's power in gathering a population of people. And if we just take a look at our deen, for example, and Islamic history, the earliest times of the Prophet, alayhi salam, there was a lot of individual uplifting that was happening. You know, he was preaching, and converts were rapidly moving into Islam. But that also didn't mean that there wasn't conquest, and that there wasn't this political movement to spread the word. And there was a system there, right? They were building a system, essentially.
Yeah.
And you need to do both at the same time, is what I'm saying. So imagine like your enemy is in the center. You've got to attack it on both sides. On one side, you need to come at it with numbers. And on the other side, the only way you're going to build those numbers is if every member of that larger group is conscious, is alert, is awake, has all the facts, understands, the nuances of what is happening. Otherwise, what you have is what we have today, a huge mass of emptiness. It's just bodies and no mind. There's, and it becomes completely unproductive. We get nowhere. And you also have a lot of like very damaged people. A lot of us we don't have answers. We don't know where to start. And so we just give in, and it becomes this life of lethargy. We resort to just, being on social media all day long, getting laid, getting drunk, doing this, doing that. And this is true for Muslims too. This is not just non-Muslims. This is Muslims too, right? It's ways of coping with this dysthymia and this depressing sort of era that we live in. So I agree. We do need to deal with ourselves as individuals, and we need to recognize the power and the potential within each of us. And at the same time, we need to band together to create a movement that is don't think of it as like we need to dismantle the system. No. What is the system you're going to have that is going to replace that? Have we thought about that? What is supposed to replace the system once you theoretically have torn it down? Nobody ever talks about that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, and I'm always thinking to myself, oh yeah, this is great. Okay, so when we're done with, white supremacy, what is the world going to look like next? But we don't even think about that, because subconsciously, if not consciously, we know that system is not going to disappear during our lifetime. So you're already operating with the sense that you're going to fail.
Yeah, exactly. There is this video that I believe both of us have shared by Killer Mike, and basically it's exactly what you said. You can't have your revolution because you are the system. Like
Exactly.
you're so ingrained within the system that there's no way that a revolution can happen. Because what are you gonna sort of, is the word revolute?
Revolt.
Yeah, revolt. Oh my God, brain fart. What are you gonna revolt against? Because like you don't know, like you have no. If it comes down to it, it's gonna come down to violence, right? So you
Mhm.
have no ability to defend yourself or assert your will. You have no, supply lines. Yeah,
Agriculture. Yeah,
exactly,
exactly.
exactly. You don't have your own food. You don't have your own, weaponry. You're soft basically, and then you're just gonna get gunned down, right?
You're a slave to the system. This is why, again, Islam has taught us not to be preachy, because I'm the last person to talk about Islam. But this is why we're taught to stay away from the manifestation that is capitalism and riba. And we've become a slave to the dollar. It will collapse in the near future. And then what? Where are we going to find ourselves? We have one, two, maybe three generations of people now who cannot be self-sustaining. We don't know what to do without all of the resources that exist in our world today. Can you imagine not having your phone on you for a week? How
Yeah,
about a day?
yeah,
Or not having or no Wi-Fi, right? Or I mean, I also feel like our bodies can't handle the idea of let's go without water for a week and let's see what happens.
yeah.
We don't have the physical ability to deal with any kind of trauma, whereas there was a time when our ancestors could.
Right.
Not anymore.
Yeah, I think it's again it comes back to the whole, self-awareness and working on yourself first, because all of these things are necessary if eventually you do have to uh, if you do have to throw hands, like then you got to be ready, right? And that takes working on
Exactly.
yourself. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's move on to things that are sort of less serious.
Hmm.
There was a Facebook post recently by Dalia Mogahed calling out the brothers for not marrying these older, well accomplished, smart, funny, beautiful, ultra religious, exceptional sisters. And basically, she was saying that I'm going to teach my sons to marry up. Um, and I sort of created a video response to that, which I've shared with you as well. And
Hmm.
I just wanted to get your thoughts on, because you're a divorcee, and I assume that you're sort of looking to get married again. What have been your experiences as a divorcee trying to get married?
So first, the video that you shared with me, I want to make sure I understand your argument and your perspective on the entire subject. So you believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, your belief is that um, a woman's quote unquote value deteriorates with time, like milk, apparently, and a man's value increases with time, like
Wine,
wine,
yeah.
which you drink every night, apparently. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay, so am I right? Is that
Yeah, I'll exactly. It's right. So there is, if you look at marriage like a marketplace, there is a market value attached to a woman and a man. That value increases uh, as the man ages, and it decreases as the woman ages, specifically because of the woman's place as the childbearer, as the as so basically the younger she is, the more valuable she is within the marriage marketplace. Whereas
okay?
the
Can I ask you a
man's,
question?
yeah,
Why
yeah, just can I just finish
why do
this real
you
quick?
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so the man's value will increase based on his ability to be a protector and a provider. So the more resources that he has, the more social status that he has, that makes him more valuable. And you can go ahead now.
Sorry about that.
No, go for
Okay,
it.
so why are we looking at this through the lens of market value?
Because that's just like a guy thing, right? We systematize things in order to get the best benefit in a cost benefit situation.
Okay. So as a practicing Muslim, and I know you identify as like a conservative Muslim, what confuses me a little bit about that is how black and white that sort of outlook is, and how it differs from the way that our prophet went about, modeling the idea of marriage and, what really matters in a marriage and so on and so forth. So I understand and I can wrap my mind around the idea that what you just described is cultural practice, but I don't know that I would agree that this is necessarily the ideal way of an entire society imagining and, executing these kinds of relations, especially when the first wife of the prophet was much older than he was. And, she was there to support him. She was there during the most trying times of his life. So there's a difference there in my mind. Cultural practice, which I don't think aligns as neatly as it wants to think that it does with Islam. As far as what Dalia Mogahed was saying, I don't disagree with her. I don't disagree that there are lots of older Muslim women who are extremely accomplished and who have a lot to offer, and they're being bypassed because of their age. That is a problem. But I also think part of the reason why that has become a problem is because of feminism. And a lot of the feminist ideologies that Muslim women have inadvertently adopted. I also think it's symptomatic of, what has happened to Muslim millennials whose parents immigrated to Western countries, and this completely wrecked our social situation because, back home, there was a way of sort of going about life, and you had not just your immediate family there to protect you. You had your entire distant relatives. It was a village that was raising, every single child. And here in the West, it's not that anymore. So you don't have support. Girls are constantly encouraged and pushed to stay in school for as long as they can, or else they get married right out of high school, if not sooner. And so neither situation proves to be ideal for the practicing Muslim woman. And I think a lot of that is symptomatic of exile and the refugee status of a lot of Muslims. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I got you. There's two things there. The first is that my advice was not excluding the normal requirements that you would have in finding a spouse. So the whole thing of finding marrying for taqwa, finding a righteous woman, and trying to go about it in the prophetic way is the foundation. That's a given. So I didn't need to sort of explain it because it's assumed, that my audience is, religious Muslims.
Got it.
And, all things being equal, if you have two equally practicing women from equally, good families, you're going to go with the younger one as opposed to the older one. And all things being equal, if you have two men that are equally practicing and equally, appealing, you're going to go with the one that has that is more stable in life and can, be a better provider for your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that's true.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
Yeah, and those are practical considerations that they're not really culture. It's just human interaction and social contracts, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that exists outside of Muslim circles too. In non-Muslim America, it's pretty much the same way. It's still like that. Women want men with lots of social status.
Right.
Whether they want to admit it or not, it is the case. I mean, an educated woman, by and large, will look away when, a man who's maybe a blue-collar worker is interested in her. It's just, this is how it continues to be. So, I mean, I guess if the question is, does this happen? Then yeah, it absolutely does happen. If Dalia Mugahed is saying she's going to teach her boys to marry up, I don't think that that's impossible. I don't know that that's necessarily something that can be translated across an entire society. I think, that's going to take a long time to get to that point, and I don't necessarily know that it's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm sort of looking at it, the reason why I made the video in the first place is because of what you mentioned, because women don't marry down, and that's just. It's just like a fact of life, isn't it? So you have these older Muslim women. They're very well accomplished. They've got careers. They're very well educated, and most of the time, they're the men that the community is trying to get these women to marry, or get the men to marry these women, are the kind of men that these women would not look at. Or not consider, because these are younger men. They probably just out of college. Maybe they've just started their jobs or whatever, and they don't have experience with women. And this is actually my whole problem with this situation. Why would you want a man who, let's say both are religious, okay? So both have don't have that much experience with the opposite sex. Why would you want a man who has no experience with women whatsoever to marry an older woman who has a bit more experience in life and has interacted a bit more? It's just a recipe for almost disaster, right? Unless you have two people who are very, God conscious.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, yes, it makes sense. I think it really does vary from context to context or situation to situation. But yes, by and large, I would agree that somebody who has had a lot more experience in life is going to feel unfulfilled with, somebody who has yet to go through the same experiences or process. What I find with a lot of the older Muslim women in America, like mid to late 30s, 40s, is they are either settling at the end of the day. So they're settling for maybe somebody who's in their age bracket or maybe slightly younger, but who is not as compatible with them, but has the same social status. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not, they're like, they don't actually want to be married to this person. Maybe for some of them, they kind of can't stand the person, but it's like, it looks good. He's a doctor, I'm a lawyer, and yeah, he's 2 years younger, but that's not a big deal. And I need to have kids because time is ticking. Right. So that happens a lot. I do see that a lot. I also see a lot of older Muslim women marrying outside of the faith or the culture. So that is also something that is becoming a lot more common, as I guess you could say a way to cope or as a solution to the situation itself. But, in an ideal world, we wouldn't be women who would need to, I guess, get to the point where we're having to settle or we're having to, live in regret and look back at time and say, where did my life go? I spent it, focusing on or over focusing on one aspect of my life. You can be a very educated Muslim. You should be educated. It's a part of our deen. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But it's not the be all and end all of life. Even if you are not a Muslim, like F that. Who wants to live their life like that? Life is about human connection. It's about community. It's about society. And I really get bored with hearing the arguments about like,
I don't need a man. I can live my life and be happy, and I'm single and life is good and I'm a career woman. Okay, first off, I'm 30 years old and I'm the one of the youngest, if not the youngest, employees where I work, and I run the school. So you can be a career woman and still come to terms with the fact that, like, you do want to be with somebody. You don't want to live alone all your life. I don't want to be alone all my life. What kind of existence is that? I'll kill myself, like, bored as hell. You know? I mean, my life does not revolve around my work. It doesn't. I don't want it to revolve around my work, as a choice, because where I get my most joy, where I feel most fulfilled, where I feel most at peace is when I'm with people, when I'm talking to people, when I'm connecting with them on very deep levels. And that happens in family and in relationships. So, it's a stale argument. This whole, like, be a career woman, do you, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, do you. You'll be doing yourself until you're 60 because no one else is going to be there to do you.
Yeah, I think these women are generally just, they're trying to convince themselves, or they're in a situation where life is pretty good for them. They've got everything they need. But eventually, there's this thing called the wall that every woman hits. And that's around the time where, her biological clock starts telling her that she's running out of time. She needs to settle down. And once they pass that point, that's when the sort of resentment and, depression and stuff sort of kicks in. And you'll find them, reminiscing about, or having jealousy towards couples who are, married and happy and things like that. And I mean, what's wrong with, getting married and then having your education? Like, what's wrong with marrying young? What's wrong with all of these? They seem very out there and, like, progressive, but they're normal, right? Marrying young, going to
it happens.
Together.
It's not. Yeah, it does happen. And I, if somebody was to ask me, like, what do you think the solution is? I think the best case scenario, there is no ideal solution, but the best case scenario is, like, yeah, you marry either while you're in university or shortly thereafter. You don't need to have kids right away. You're young, so you can wait if you want to. And, like, be done with it. You don't need to hold off and live this miserable. First of all, the 20s are depressing. Everybody knows that. Our 20s are depressing, especially if you're in the West, because you are busting your ass to, like, make it in your line of work. And it doesn't need to be all about that, especially for Muslims, right? Practicing Muslims who maintain their, like, who maintain their virginity and are not in relationships, and they don't date. At some point, you're gonna falter. So, like, rather than to wait to get there, do it in such a way where it's halal and you can live your life. You can pursue your career or you can pursue your education, whatever it is. Lots of people are doing this and they're very happy, it seems.
Yeah, even in our community, it's starting to become more common. I know a friend of mine. He's much younger than me. He's just in university. His parents, before he went to university, they got him married, and he and his wife, they went to the same university together, and I think they've graduated, and I believe a few days ago they just had their first child.
Yeah, mashallah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the only caveat with that is, you got to make sure that the community is healthy, because you're talking about young adults. They're still developing. They're still growing. They're going to need a lot of support emotionally, psychologically, maybe financially. And that's where the paradigm in Islam differs, from this Western idea that you need to have all your dollars in the bank. You've got to make sure that you've completely developed as an adult, which is a completely illogical, and it's a myth because you never stop developing. Let's be serious. You become more mature with time, I would hope. But how many older parents do we see that we're like, man, you're unfit to be a parent. You should have never been a father or a mother. And there are lots of young folks who it's like they were born to be parents.
Right.
So age can be very arbitrary, but if we're going the route of marrying younger, and I personally don't see an issue with that as long as the couple has the support of their family and their community to help them to have a successful relationship and marriage and family if they decide that that's what they want early on.
That's where the parents come in, right? You need very progressive parents. I mean, if I had my way, like the guys would be married off as soon as their balls drop, and then the dad would just support them until they can get on it, you know? Because I mean, the struggle is real, man. I don't know if it's the same with girls, but I'm pretty sure it is the same. I know there's a lot of pornography watching with the Muslim girls as well. And obviously, both Muslim men and women are hoeing on the side if they can't get married. So I mean, these are serious problems. And why would you switch something halal and easy, or it's supposed to be easy, marriages, with something that's eventually is just going to fall into haram, right?
Yeah, it is definitely a challenge, and it's not new. It's not like it just, happened in the last few years. It's been going on for a very long time, and I don't know that anybody has fully figured it out, but I think what I love when I see, look, I get on millennials a lot, but as a millennial, I'm also very hopeful in our generation because I see a lot of fervor and a lot of desire to learn more about true Islam and how we can make it make sense in our context, in our time, and in our place. And there's a lot of couples out there and a lot of young Muslims out there who are trying to find those solutions that will do work for our situation and our time. And I don't necessarily know that our parents did as good of a job at that because, they came to the West not knowing what to really expect. So unfortunately, a lot of them struggled.
Yeah, I get you. I think, there's been sort of I guess you can call it an awakening of Muslims, or an Islamic awakening, and then people are just more in tune with their faith now, and they're starting to sort of figure things out and apply it in a more dynamic way than the generation before. But I
think your daughter just fell down the stairs.
No, those are my cats. I have two cats. And they go crazy once in a while sometimes. So let's talk about sort of your situation in general. We will talk about you specifically, but we talked about the younger marriage. Now you're a divorcee. You're a little bit older. You're no spring chicken. Now, what's the solution for like women like you? Because me, if I'm being honest, I married up, and my wife was very she wanted a very traditional Islamic marriage, and that was I lucked out. So that's one situation where it works, but that's not the norm. Muslim women who are older, sort of more financially well off than the man who's proposing, they're not technically, generally they're not going to give him a chance. So what's the out here?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case necessarily in the United States. And obviously I'm just going off of my own experience and the experience of, people that I know. I mean, I'm not young, but I'm also not old, so I don't know if that puts me in a situation where I'm still like, worthwhile or worth considering, but I do get offers. There are people who are interested. For me right now, it's poor timing because of my life circumstances. I would like to get married at some point in the near future, but right now I can't. I support my family, and it's not a situation that I can walk away from right away. But that's kind of a separate issue. There are Muslim men who are within my age bracket, slightly older or 30, who I would say yes to. Like for me, as far as like what I'm looking for, yeah, they're great. They don't I don't consider them to be less than or that I would be marrying down or anything like that. And I can say that the same holds true for a lot of Muslim women who are within my age bracket as well, where they're either engaged or they are married recently. And so I think late 20s, early 30s is kind of like the new mid 20s, so to speak, at least here in the United States. A lot of Muslim women are getting married within this age bracket now. And I think a lot of it does have to do with the fact that, they pursued their education and it took longer. Their families also did not want to marry them off when they were young. Like parents make this choice too. It's not just the girls.
Yeah, exactly.
Parents also a lot of them don't want that. And so the men that they're marrying, some of them are extremely conservative. They're very, like they held on and waited until they were 30. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. And then
champion.
And then there are others who, they don't go around like advertising it, but they had a previous life and they've decided that it's time to settle down. Yay for being a man and having the ability to get away with that. And so, it's up to the woman at that point if she's able to see past that. And a lot of them, if not most of them, are, and they're okay with it. One of the things that I find particularly heartwarming, I will say, is that there are a lot of Muslim women in their 20s and in their 30s that I have met through between Arabs who have said to me, like, I had a really bad experience in the past, or I lived X, Y, and Z kind of life. And these are like Arabs and Muslims. So they knew growing up what they were doing was haram. But nonetheless, they lived their lives, and they eventually decided that they wanted to be more pious or that they needed to recommit to Islam. And they were able to find men who understood that and who embraced them and who actually kind of gave them this second chance at life or this ability to learn and grow with them. Some of these men have had similar situations as them. They've lived, previous lives as well. And then others haven't. So it really varies from circumstance to circumstance. But I do find it's really inspiring because the reality is there are a lot of Muslim Western Muslims, women who, growing up in the West, they do fall prey to the over-sexualized culture that is existent here. And for a lot of them, unfortunately, this happens in their early teenage years where they don't even have the wherewithal to not do what they're doing. And so once the act has been done, there's no taking it back. But then, so what does that mean? They're doomed for life. Is there any way back? Is there any way to repent and, make up for that? And it's so great to see that there are men who can understand, women who've gone through these experiences or who have gone through trauma or who have been sexually abused by family members within the Muslim community. And they give them this opportunity to just be human again and to be practicing Muslims and to be embraced within the community. And it's great. And I think more and more people need to start talking about that issue as well, because I bet you a lot of people in our age range are struggling because of these very reasons, struggling with the whole marriage situation because of these reasons.
Right. That brings up a good point. Okay, so now, so these women are looking for husbands, and a lot of the times the community leaders or speakers or whoever it is will encourage Muslim men who, in general, they would be, I guess, the practicing Muslim men who have zero experience with women. They haven't messed around. They've kept it together, and they will want these men to marry women who either they have a past or they've been divorced or they're widowed or something like that. So they're not virgins. There is a dynamic there that I sort of have a problem with, because these men who've held on, they should be with with a woman who's a virgin, as opposed to because it's something that they have to explore together, right? Because the guy having no experience with women whatsoever is going to have a problem. I guess in general, I'm not. This is not a universal statement. Is going to have a problem dealing with this woman who has had previous sexual experience before.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I I don't disagree with that. I think that it's important to be as it's important to have more commonality when it comes to your level of sexual experience and, experience with the opposite sex as possible, because especially for women, it's a huge turnoff. And that's something that I don't know that a lot of women will necessarily admit, but it is a huge turnoff when you find yourself, excuse me, having to like teach or mentor or coach or mother your spouse, unless that's something that comes naturally to you. Because I don't want to say all women, because I do have friends who are very maternal in that way and they don't mind it at all. But a lot of women, and I would say myself included, at some point you get to a place where you're like, I love you, I have love for you, but I don't want to be your mother. Right. I want to learn from you. I want you to add value to my life. I appreciate and enjoy the fact that I can add value to yours, but this is me giving. What am I getting out of this? I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel like I'm being nurtured in the way that I need to as a woman. Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just a straight up male-female dynamic thing where the woman, it's her nature to let the man lead. And that's just a normal thing that's been beaten out of women over the past few decades because of feminism, particularly in the West, and now increasingly more so in the East.
Yeah.
So that's the general. This is what I'm saying. So these guys, they have no game, they have no social skills. Okay, these
you're so mean. You're like, these poor. I'm imagining like scrawny little men.
With the man in your head, exactly, perfectly. Very humble. He's got his kufi on. He's got this he's got this scraggly beard that is. It's that baby hair, right? Because he's never shaved ever in his life. Yeah, it's not a full manly beard yet. So these guys, you want this miskeen guy to marry like this 30-year-old woman who maybe she's had a husband before and she's been she's lived life, Yani.
Yeah, but unless, this is, again, Nabil, it comes down to circumstance, because we don't know oftentimes, like, there are women who, yes, they get to a point where they're like, I don't care about love. I don't care about lust. That to me doesn't matter. I'm not looking for that. There are women like that. Okay. It's a very practical union for them.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. Mashallah, go for it. You guys will be all right. But I want to say, if not 100%, then at least 90% of Muslim women in the West don't fall into that category, right? Like most of us, we've been inundated with the Hollywood like romance narrative. We want our Prince Charming. We want, a relationship, like a real relationship. That's not just this like exchange.
Yeah, you want seduction and passion and all of these things.
Right, because that's what we've been fed. That's what we've been sold, right? And especially if you're a virgin and you've held on all your life, you're like, what? I get one. It better be a good one.
For real. Exactly. I mean, it's just so, and it goes beyond just the, fiqh and seerah and, what did the Prophet do and things like that. There's so much dynamic. There's so many dynamics at play here. This is one of the reasons why I actually started, the website, because of these dynamics that Muslim men they're not taught. They're not taught. I don't know if their dads teach them, but ultimately the problem is that Muslim guys, if they've been practicing or if they are practicing, they don't really have game and they need to learn. And nobody teaches men anymore how to be men.
Right.
It used to be back in the day. That the male authority figures in your life would teach you.
Yeah.
But
So I
and
want to say a few things, but you got to do me a favor and you got to make sure you cut what I'm going to say out because I have to be careful a little bit. Okay? Deal?
what do you mean cut? I don't edit my shows. You gotta
You
be.
have to. What do you mean you don't edit your shows? How do you
No,
not edit?
I edit for sound. I don't edit for content. So I don't
Oh,
cut.
so then so
Yeah.
then let's keep moving it along then.
No, you gotta be honest with me. You gotta now you mentioned it. You gotta spill it
Well,
now.
no, because we have to look, we both are, figures when it comes to the different projects that we present. So I'm not just speaking as Nour Jude, I'm speaking as the founder of a project. So I don't want to overshare because there is such a thing. I don't want to overshare and give off, a message that I don't want it misconstrued. I don't want it taken out of context, and it could very easily be taken out of context.
All right. I mean, you can share what you want, and then we'll figure out how to cut it if you want to. But ultimately, I think this is the kind of content that people want to hear from somebody like you. We're done
I mean, I
with
guess
that.
I'll just say this. I've been vocal about the fact that I'm very critical of feminism. That's not something that I shy away from. I am very critical of it. I hope that I don't need to say to anybody that I'm all for the rights of women. If I
Exactly.
need to say that, then we're in a backward situation already. So I don't like going around, qualifying the fact that, yeah, I'm all for women's rights. I'm a woman. Of course I'm for women's rights.
Exactly. Yeah,
hello. But at the same time, with the exception of maybe the organization Mosawa, which tries to root its work in Islam and the Quran and what was already given to women through Islam. Everything else I have questions with. Every other kind of feminism has serious problems in my opinion. And so this whole perception of masculinity and what masculinity is and how it's so toxic, that to me is questionable because as a woman, and yes, as a heterosexual woman, if I need to add that bit in there.
You mean you're not trans? I'm assuming your gender.
I find well, the problem is I'm talking about feminism, so I have to clarify my orientation. I have to
Clarify
use
your pronouns. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah. Exactly. Masculinity is attractive. If there's a lack of masculinity there, then there for me is no attraction. So how can I as a heterosexual woman be critical of masculinity when naturally that is what draws me to the opposite sex? I don't understand. It makes no sense to me. And so when we're talking about relationships and you have the word alpha in your in the title of your work, this idea that alpha women should be marrying beta men. What the hell? Really? No, an alpha woman needs an ultra alpha man. She can be an alpha woman. It just means she needs a stronger man to, be a man essentially. But what I find is, especially here in the United States, we coach women into marrying down. But what ends up happening is a lot of these relationships sour because the woman overimposes herself on the man. She completely emasculates him and in many ways verbally and psychologically abuses him. I see this almost daily in New York, and I feel for the men. I really feel for them. You can just see the looks on their faces. It's no self-efficacy, no self-esteem whatsoever. They're done. Their sense of self is in crisis. And I mean, use whatever derogatory phrase you want to use, Nabil, because that's what you do.
No, it's not it's a technical term. It's not derogatory.
Really?
Yeah, it is.
Really? That's what Trump said. That's what Trump said.
Look, I mean, you mentioned the alpha woman, right? So that's an interesting dynamic, and we can explore that further. So Melania Trump is an alpha woman, but she is a beta. She is a beta in her relationship with Trump.
Yeah.
So the woman in the presence of the right man, an alpha man in general, or somebody who knows how to, who has the requisite skills and status or whatever that she needs, the woman switches. She might be like a total killer outside, but in the home, she follows the traditional male-female dynamic. It's the whole masculine feminine energy thing, right? It's supposed to be that way.
You had a speaker recently. I forget his name. He's like a dating coach or something, and
Pat
he talked
Stedman.
about yes,
Pat,
Pat Stedman. He had some very interesting things to say, especially as a Westerner and a non-Muslim, and a lot of what he had to say resonates with the dynamics that we espouse in Islam.
Yep.
And what's very interesting is that, like, he's got a following. Like, there are people who are down and dirty with what he does, and they don't question it. But imagine if you had a label on him and you put a kufi on him, and he grew out a beard, and he's like, instead of being Pat Stedman, his name is like Muhammad Khan.
Yeah.
And now he's presenting his work. It becomes problematic and misogynistic.
Yeah, exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
This is why this is why I was sort of drawn to that to the manosphere in general, because all of this stuff, I don't need red pill theory to tell me how to behave in a relationship. I have Islam for that, and it's
Right.
I just need the language, because these movements came up in reaction to feminism. So their entire shtick is the theory and practice of responding to feminism. So the language and terminology and the theoretical framework, when I'm speaking in English to an English-speaking audience, I sort of have to borrow that terminology and framework, because the language that is being used from the feminist side is all of this intersectionality. We talked about, critical race theory, patriarchy, toxic masculinity. And toxic masculinity is a bunch of bullshit, because all of masculinity is that. They've basically called all of masculinity toxic. That aggression, that uncontrolled maleness is all of masculinity. It is actually reined in and controlled by the feminine energy. You don't try to stamp it out. The woman, the feminine energy is there to harness it and direct it in a way that is, productive and constructive and a benefit to society.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And then let's talk about between Arabs. Now you've been doing a few talks recently. You just you've just done a talk at, what was it, a law college, and then you've got one coming up as well.
Yeah, it was at John Jay College here in New York City, and I'm going to be at my alma mater, Connecticut College, next Friday. And I'm actually going to be collaborating with one of my bloggers, Janan Shohaib. She's a Lebanese American. She's also an alum of Connecticut College, and we're going to kind of like riff off of each other. The audience is predominantly white, so this is not the intended audience for which the Between Arabs project is made necessarily. Usually when I go on these talks, I'm speaking to Muslims and or Arabs, and that doesn't necessarily mean that nobody else can gain anything from it. Absolutely. There is a lot of inner community and inner cultural dialogue that can happen. But first and foremost, I'm addressing our community, and I'm asking the community to focus on itself. So it's going to be interesting to step into a situation where the majority of the audience is not Arab and Muslim, and to try to have a dialogue about what it means to be Arab and Muslim in America at this time, and the way that we have this double consciousness and the way that we imagine ourselves when we're thinking from the perspective of the West, and then how we're imagining ourselves when we're among our families and our friends. And sort of just like opening up the dialogue to the audience to see what questions they have and curiosities they have about our identities.
And aside from these two talks and the two short podcasts that you've dropped recently, there's been like, I don't know, 4 to 6 months where Between Arabs completely fell off the map.
Why you gotta do that, Nabil? Why you gotta do that? Why? Why do you have to call me out like that?
Because people like Between Arabs. I mean, I was sharing your shit every week, man.
I mean, I told you. This is okay. So here we go again. This is what happens when feminism dominates the world, and you, as a woman, are forced to play the role of a man. Long story short, I'm in a situation where I have to put in a lot of work hours. I recently got a promotion at work, and it was like a 1-year interim position. Alhamdulillah, now I'm going back to my original position, so things will die down a little bit. But I had to completely overhaul a school, and my parents rely on me a lot financially, so there's that element to it. And Between Arabs is not going to pay my bills and help my family in the immediate term, so it had to sit on the back burner for a little while. But I missed it. I really missed being able to engage with the community. It's what I love to do. And the Between Arabs project is something that I'm very passionate about, and I want to see it grow. I really want to give it my heart and soul. If I could quit my job and do this full time, I absolutely would. But that's not looking like it's possible anytime in the near future. So that's why there was a gap in between. But I actually released a vlog last night, so I'm happy that that's out, and I'm going to try to do more videos in addition to the podcast, because I've gotten a lot of feedback from the community about the fact that like they don't listen to podcasts and why am I not on YouTube, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to try to put out that kind of content, even though it's a lot more work. Thanks a lot, guys. But inshallah, it'll be what people are looking for.
Yeah, the video episodes were pretty good too, because you do some pretty decent editing. Like the cooking episode was a good one. There were two cooking episodes, was it, or just the one?
Yeah, I took that one down because what I'm trying to do, and I'm going to be working on this in the next couple of months, I'm trying to clean up the Between Arabs content and keep it strictly Between Arabs and leave my personal life to the side.
Right.
I don't want to mix the two so much, so that video has been taken down.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that work has been crazy. Let's talk about this American, work ethic and its relationship to feminism. You sort of touched on that.
Yeah.
But let's dig in a little bit deeper, a bit deeper into that now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a concept that I wrote about in one of my very first pieces that I put out back in 2015. I think it was titled, "Did Western Feminism Trigger My Failed Marriage?" And I truly believe that in the long run, the ideals that feminism espouses are actually working against women. And on the surface, it seems like it's liberating women and it's supporting their development, but it's not. It's really not, because so many of us would love to have that balance of being able to pursue our passions, our careers, our hobbies, and also get married, have children, or travel the world, or whatever it is. And we're stuck, especially because of capitalism. And we are putting in way too many hours into our careers, not enough time at home with the children. And I see this with the parents at my school. These are moms who take 3 months off, which is not nearly enough time after you've given birth. They take 3 months off to be with their child. They have yet to bond with them, and then they're back to work again, and they're miserable. They're so miserable. And the interesting thing that I'm finding is a lot of the husbands are refusing to allow the wives to stay home, partly because of the financial burden that it would impose on their lifestyle. So the feminism and capitalism work hand in hand, because we're a consumer culture and we have to, save face. We've got to live this lavish lifestyle and keep up with the Joneses. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we don't come off as women who are lazy and who just want to stay home and be spoiled princesses. That's the connotation, at least as far as I've experienced it here in the United States. If you're a stay-at-home mom, that is a synonym for you're lazy, you're pampered, your husband is a millionaire, and you don't contribute anything, right? Which is not the case at all. Like, a lot of these families try to figure out how to make ends meet. They downsize. They do what they need to do for the sake of their children. And this is Muslims and non-Muslims. But I think there is definitely language and a narrative around what it means to be a hard worker and what your work ethic is. And that has almost a antithetical attitude towards being a mother. To take years off to raise your children is not an option. Get yourself a nanny or a caregiver to raise your kids. Which, to me, this is one of the reasons why, like, I did not have kids when I was married, because I didn't want that. I didn't want other people raising my children.
Right. And you mentioned there's a bunch of really important points in there. So the first thing is that, the society or the government or the corporate overlords, they can't have 50% of society not consuming or not contributing to the economy, or not adding to the GDP, or however you want to phrase that. So that's one aspect. And the second aspect you mentioned about how feminism is hurting women. Have you heard of the paradox of happiness?
No, I have not.
So
now
basically,
I'm intrigued.
there was this study done, longitudinal study over many decades, and it showed that the reported levels of happiness of women have been steadily decreasing over time. So the way the study is constructed, basically it shows that as women get more and more freedoms and more quote unquote equality, they become more and more miserable. And I don't know if you've seen the studies which show that more women than ever are on antidepressants and various medications for psychological issues. But you're right, feminism is making women miserable, because that's just not. It's like something that's against their fitra, right? It's so anytime that happens, you're gonna have like negative consequences. And these things are there for, like, Allah set it up this way for a reason, right? Because He created us. He knows how His creation works in the best way.
Yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense and resonates so much with my own life experiences. So, yeah, I don't disagree.
For real. I think we've basically covered it. And now,
there's no way you are not going to edit this podcast. It is over 2 hours long. Don't tell me you're not going to edit this, because I know you are.
No, I'm going to put it up. I'm going to put it up raw.
A 2-hour episode?
Yeah.
No way.
My peoples will listen to it, man.
Your people's got time. We don't have time like that here.
Yeah. I mean, see, this is why, actually, one of the reasons I wanted to let it go so long is because to answer the haters that Becoming the Alpha Muslim is not a misogynist website. It's a sexist website. It's a sexist website, very sexist, but it's not misogynist. Some of my, some of my biggest supporters are sisters. They send me like long emails talking about, I found your website and it's amazing, mashallah, blah, blah, blah. They send me like this 2-page rant about how things are so messed up over there and they're so glad they found my website.
The American Muslim women?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And they're like, these women are all feminists and they're driving me crazy and I don't want to speak out because I'll get shouted down and silenced. And even, my buddies, the Mad Mamluks, they have a lot of problem, talking about the stuff that they talk about. And they get a lot of flack for, being associated with me as well. Because they face a lot of, I don't know what's up with you guys. You guys don't like open dialogue for some reason over in America.
Yeah, we like our feminist ideologies and our secularism, and we like to make sure that we don't step on anybody's toes, and that means being completely PC and fully sanitized so that nothing ever gets accomplished. This is why
yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, this is why I love intellectual empathy, because it's not about being PC. It encourages you to go head on and to name the elephants in the room, talk about what you need to talk about, but all the while you have to do the heavy lifting of putting yourself in the other person's shoes. The reason One of the reasons I'm able to do, this whole Between Arabs project work is because I spent 10 years as an atheist, and alhamdulillah was able to come back to Islam in a way that is far more convincing, and my iman is in a completely different place than it was when I was a child, partly because I'm older, but partly because I came to it from a different direction on my own terms. And when I'm sitting down with atheists or agnostics or non-Muslim people, and I'm forced to have these kinds of conversations, the intellectual empathy aspect comes to me naturally because I've been in their shoes. But then I can also understand where the Muslim voice comes in and wants to save the world, so to speak. And I can see where the miscommunication is happening. So I was like, oh my God, I've got to find a solution to how to get through this muddy conversation. Like, how do I get people to hear each other and not talk over each other? And thankfully, there is an entire body of work and literature on this strategy that is called intellectual empathy. But there's no way that we're going to be able to understand each other if we're not at least being open-minded enough to say, okay, let me run with this person's logic. If I were to adopt their line of reasoning, what would be my next conclusion? And it's a scary thing. Like, if you're a Muslim and you have to stop and exercise intellectual empathy, that means at some point in time you might have to say to yourself, let me imagine that there is no God. Astaghfirullah. I have to imagine that there is no higher being. It's a terrifying place to go, but yet if your conviction and your iman is so strong, you can go there and come out alive. You should be able to go there and come out alive. If nothing more, it should fortify your deen. It should force you to have to explore why you believe what you believe so much. I don't know. I'm not about like superficial convictions. It doesn't work for me. At some point, you've got to test what you believe. And that's what led me down the atheist path. And that's the same attitude that led me back to Islam. This like raw, no nonsense. I don't trust authority. I want to know the answers. Show me the line of reasoning and I'll decide for myself. But unfortunately, a lot of us are born into ideologies that we never test. We never even give ourselves the chance to say, let me question some of these things. Questioning is not haram. It is not haram. You have to know your deen. You have to know the history. You have to explore these things. This is why education is so important. Approach is equally important. So when I get messages about you, Nabil, from women mostly, saying like, who the F is this guy? Like, why do you talk to him? I have to step back and I have to say, guys, like, we can't censor each other. We have to be intellectually empathetic. We've got to, push past it. I mean, there are a lot of things you say that I agree with. I don't agree with everything you say. There are a lot of things they say that I agree with. I don't agree with everything they say. And it's like you said before, we can agree to disagree and still, have a productive conversation. But yes, in the West, disagreement, it doesn't feel good. And people don't like things that don't feel good. We like pleasure. We like anything that makes us feel immediately satisfied. That's why everybody's running around doing whatever the hell they want to do, whenever they want to do it, how they want to do it. And nobody says anything.
Yeah, and I think, that's a good place to end this because we've gone quite long now. And I really think that with, podcasts like Between Arabs, with podcasts like the Mad Mamluks, and hopefully with a website like Becoming the Alpha Muslim, we're going to be able to, push past those barriers. Because I take a lot of flack for my my sort of willingness to talk about anything and talk to anyone, especially when I speak to people who are anti-Islam or people who are from the alt-right or new right. So I think what you said is basically very important, that we need to be able to have these ideological, tests in order to grow as, I guess, human beings and as Muslims in general, so that we can, worship our Lord better eventually. You
Right.
mentioned that you became an atheist, but when you came back from a point of, intellectual submission, where as opposed to just, ritualistic,
Right.
cultural submission, your faith is much stronger. So
Alhamdulillah.
I think websites like yours and are a great start, inshallah. So here's to more of your work, interviewing people and having these taboo conversations. And tell people where they can find you online.
You can check out the blog at betweenarabs.com. Also, the podcast is on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud. You can search Between Arabs on YouTube. And on Instagram and Twitter, it's between_Arabs.
Nour Goda, Jazakumullah khair for coming on the show, inshallah.
Waiyakum. Shukran. Thank you so much, Nabil. And we'll talk soon, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay, if you enjoyed the episode, please leave me a rating and review on iTunes. It helps other people find the show, and then it lets me know that you guys enjoy the content. That's all from me. Thank you very much. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.